for takeoff.
While I was in the air, I sold my company for $25 million and $10 million hit my bank account. It was wild.
We'll be experiencing some turbulence.
Sharon K. Gillenwater
is a tech startup founder who built and sold Boardroom Insiders.
And is now on a mission to educate entrepreneurs. With her book, Scaling with Soul, How I Built and Sold a $25 Million Tech Company Without Being an Asshole.
You're not going to outsmart the VCs when it comes to financing your company. You're just not. They're in it to make money. They don't care about your business. They don't care about your customers. They care about the money. That's the business they're in. It was 1999. It was called Fidget.com. I bootstrapped it for a while. Then in April of 2000, when the NASDAQ had already started its plummet to the bottom, we were able to raise $3 million in venture capital. But the firm took a majority stake, which wasn't a great idea. They said, all those in favor of dissolving Fidget today say aye. I thought, well, we had a deal. So it's almost 10 years later. It's a new era, right? I was working with all the biggest tech companies. I literally quit a $300,000 a year gig because somebody asked me.
The red and the blue pill. One path leads you down the VC path, with the other path strictly bootstrapping.
There's this myth that you have to raise venture capital. And what a lot of people don't talk about is...
Welcome to What the Tech, your gateway to business strategies and tech secrets shaping today's workplace. You know, Dave, startups face an uphill battle in the environment today when it comes to raising capital, bootstrapping, and successfully exiting a company. And I'm looking forward to our conversation today with Sharon.
100%. You know, I've learned a lot just doing our prep session for this. We have a lot of questions planned, and I'm ready to learn, man, for sure.
All right, so let's get right to it. Let's welcome to the podcast, Sharon K. Gillenwater. Sharon, how are you?
I'm great. Thanks so much for having me.
Well, I am glad you have come on. There's so much to know and learn when it comes to running a company, exiting a company. And, you know, what does that look like? And I know that one of the things that caught my attention, I happened to be on TikTok, and you were talking about your company and your journey, and that you had recently sold your company. But I want you to tell that story about selling your company and how much you sold it for.
Well, I decided to sell in 2021 because I got a call from a private equity firm that I had casual discussions with. And they said, you know, how's it going over there? And I said, well, we're just keeping our heads down running the company. We're having a good time and things are going well. And they said, well, that's too bad because we could give you a $48 million term sheet today.
Whoa.
And that's the first time anyone had thrown out a number or said that they wanted to proceed with a potential sale of the business. So I had to take a breath and I turned to my business partner and I said, you know, we've got to think about this because he and I were really worried about the timing. Our customers were concentrated in tech and tech had been flying high for a number of years. And you know what goes up has to come down at some point. And so I called my advisor because I didn't know anything about selling a company. I had an angel investor who was very experienced in deal making. And he said, well, don't just negotiate with one potential buyer. He said, if you truly want to explore a sale, you need to hire an M&A banker and run a process. So I went into my business partner's office and I said, what's an M&A banker and what's a process? And he explained it to me that it's like hiring a realtor, but for your business. They look at your business, they tell you what's wrong with it, what could trip you up. They put together a big marketing plan. They reach out to buyers. They generate competition and interest, and then they make sure the transaction closes. And my partner said to me, you have the most to win or lose from this, so you need to run the process, even though I had no experience doing so. And so I did. And about 8 months later, we sold the company for $25 million in cash.
Nice.
One of the questions I wanted to ask was, when you started the company, was an exit strategy always in the works? And it sounds like it wasn't always in the works. What was the turning point where you decided, you know what, let's really explore, this sale?
Well, it was really that phone call from that private equity firm. You notice there's a big difference between 48 million and 25 million.
Yes. Big
And
spread.
yeah, so I learned a lot in terms of valuations and how PE firms will just throw out some crazy valuation to get you interested. And then once you start going through the process and through due diligence, they tend to chip away, chip away, chip away. And then you find out in terms that the deal terms are not all cash. It might be a portion of cash and then some incentives for getting to a certain level later, or stock or something like that. So what I learned is that an all cash offer, even though it's at a lower valuation, is worth a lot. But when I first started the business, to answer the first part of your question, I had a dream of selling it and building it and selling something, but I didn't have the right mindset. I didn't have the confidence. I assumed it wasn't going to go anywhere. And so I did all kinds of things in the beginning that were mistakes that you wouldn't do if you were truly believing you were setting up a business to run and sell.
Right.
Partner came on 2 years later after I started the business, and we agreed from the beginning that that was our goal, but we just didn't know if we could pull it off. And the first few years with him in place, especially, were really rough. And so, we just weren't confident that we could get there, but we were confident that we could get to the point where we would have a nice business that was generating a lot of cash. And so, we didn't know what was going to happen, but those frequent calls from private equity firms were what made us think, like, well, we've got something here. Plus, getting close to that 5 million in ARR number, we knew that was kind of a magical number when it comes to terms with being considered for a purchase.
Is that the bar? If you're a company and you're aspiring to get purchased or catch the eye of some people with a lot of cash, you think that $5 million a year annual recurring revenue is where you have to be?
Really depends on the state of the market. When we were in a booming market, like before the pandemic, 2019, what we were hearing was it was 10 million. But then after 2020, when a lot of cash did not get deployed into deals because of the pandemic, companies in 2021, firms started looking what they call down market at companies with less revenue. So then 5 million was suddenly the number, right? So it really depends on the market conditions.
Well, one of the things that when we're talking about market, I remember, I had the chance to talk about a little bit about this earlier, and the market goes up and down, and your first venture had a very different outcome. And when you started your entrepreneurial journey, and you learned the ropes of what it's like and some of the pitfalls, share with me and our audience what it was like when you started that first venture, because it didn't go so well.
Yeah, so I started an email newsletter company in 1999, and it was called fidget.com. Information for restless minds was our tagline. And email newsletters were kind of a burgeoning thing then. And so I bootstrapped it for a while, had just a little bit of money from the sale of a domain name. And then in April of 2000, when the NASDAQ had already started its plummet to the bottom, we were able to raise $3 million in venture capital. But the firm took a majority stake, which wasn't a great idea. And they were also an incubator, which means they handled our accounting and our legal and HR and all those things.
And is that common, just as a point of reference here for folks that are not familiar with incubators? In my brain, because I've not been through an incubator, I thought an incubator maybe just had an office, you shared computers and all that, but it sounds like they do way more than that.
Back in the 90s, they did. It was, I think, more common than it is now. But yeah, they might have an office. In our case, we were just all virtual until we raised that money. And they really, their pitch to you is you're an entrepreneur, you don't want to do accounting or finance or legal or all of these things. Let us take that off your plate. We'll have a majority stake in the business and you can focus on running the business. So it sounded great to me, especially since I had been doing all of those things. I was always screwing up our accounting because I'm not an accountant. And and furthermore, I find it extremely boring. So yeah, it sounded great to me to have all that taken off our plate. But it made it that much easier for them to not fully fund what they had committed to. So they never put that full 3 million in our bank account, allowing us to benefit from interest.
Unbeknownst to you, or were you
unbeknownst?
Oof.
Unbeknownst to us. Yeah. Well, the whole thing from start to finish, it was April to November when they kind of, imploded our company because they had a majority stake. And so they could vote to do that. But then they also knew what bills we had and what had already been paid, and they wouldn't tell us. So when it came to negotiating a settlement, when they basically told us we're pulling out of this commitment, we didn't know how much we owed or what had been paid or not paid. So that was a difficult position to be in. So it was a terrible experience. And so when I got to the point of starting Boardroom Insiders, I was determined to not take money from someone I didn't know well or trust.
Yep. Is that a common, I want to call it a trick. It almost sounds like they weren't completely honest. They were telling you they want to bring you all this value. They can handle a lot of these things that you just said you weren't good at or you weren't so interested in. They were withholding some money. Is that a common trap?
No, I don't think so. I mean, this firm, it all started out great. They were people who were ex-Disney people who had built Disney's first online properties. It was 1999, so the internet was very new. It was almost maybe pre-Google. I can't remember, but no, what happened, when there's a crash or a crisis, people show their true colors. And that's what happened. It was a very, companies were imploding right and left, .coms. They called it the dot bomb for a reason, right? And so what happened is their CEO got fired and they brought in a new CEO who only wanted to invest in biotech companies. And we were one of maybe 3 content companies that they were invested in. And I don't know what happened with the other 2, but they just wanted out. They wanted to flush us out of their portfolio. And in fact, this company went on to become, and still is, one of the biggest patent trolls in the United States.
Wow.
So they pivoted, after they got rid of us, they pivoted to patent trolling specifically around streaming technologies, and they went after porn sites. So this is who we were dealing with.
Wow.
But that was not the original team that we signed up to work with. So it was just, when we raised the money, despite the fact that the crash was happening, we thought we were lucky, but it was really unlucky because had I not raised the money, I know I could have kept bootstrapping that company. It was very lean and pretty easy to run just on my own with some contractors. So, lesson learned.
And I think you'd said to me that you got a very uncomfortable call one day from them, roped you into a meeting, and then what happened next?
So they had been stalling while they planned this whole thing that they were, getting out. They had been stalling. And so what they told us was, you need to come up with a new business plan. And we scheduled a teleconference for a certain date, a couple weeks out. And so my partner and I worked on that business plan, and we couldn't pivot to biotech. We were a content company. So the plan we put together just involved accelerating our revenue growth, being more aggressive to grow our revenue in the short term. And so we got on the phone on the appointed day and we were prepared to present our new plan. And without anything else, they said, all those in favor of dissolving Fidget today say aye. And there were 3 ayes on their end and 2 nays on our end.
Ooh.
And that was it. And they hung up. And then
They just
directly
went click.
after,
They just
pretty
went click.
much. Yeah.
Oh my God.
Directly
Oh.
after that, there was a knock on our office door, and there was a process server. And both my partner and I were presented with papers saying that they were suing us for fraud. And to add insult to injury, they had written, they write physical descriptions of you on the papers for the process server. And to demoralize us, they wrote pudgy on my partner's paperwork, and they wrote 40-ish on mine. And I was only 35 at the
Oh, what
time.
an insult. That's an insult. Not even demoralized, but an insult.
So, and then after that, one of their partners flew in from LA and took me and my partner upstairs in the conference room and said, we'll give you each $100,000, or we'll give 3 weeks severance to all the employees. And so we chose the severance. I just thought that was slimy. Like, we'll give you some money to screw over all your employees.
You just send them off, kick them off into the street, to the curb.
Yeah. So, they were not really ethical people. They were
What do
playing
you do when you're in
hardball
that
with us.
situation? Like, you get that, essentially that happens. They hang up on you. What is that like? Like, you're on the other line. You're like, what did just happen? Are you in shock? What was going on in your mind?
Yeah, we were in shock, and we had an open office, so we told everybody immediately what had happened, and then we knew we were all going to be laid off that day because they told us we're flying up. And we started looking around the office, and I realized all of the desks, the chairs, the computers, the swag, the beer and wine, everything we had in our office, we bought before we took their investment.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't know if they were going to come in and try to take everything away. So I just told everybody, like, start putting all this stuff in your cars and just take it because
Take it home. Take it all home.
I called my husband. We had a big station wagon, and we just lived like a mile away. And I'm like, get the car down here. We just took everything out of the office because I didn't know if people were going to be offered severance or, what the deal was going to be. So I wanted everyone to just get away with as much stuff as they could, equipment, swag, booze, whatever we had.
Can I ask you, where did you find the strength? Because I put myself in your shoes here. When you get that news, it's like an anvil just dropped on your head, and it's probably scary, even frightening in some ways. When something like that, this is some seriously bad news. I mean, there's no way to put it, no way to sugarcoat it. What's your mind? You talk about mindset. What's your mindset after that? I mean, you're telling people, giving instructions, but I'm sure in the back of your head, you had to be like wanting to cry. I would want to cry. I'd be crying all day long.
I didn't cry for quite some time. I was just in action mode. And I thought, well, we had a deal, like how do we hold them to what they promised? So first thing I did was get on the phone with our lawyer and set up an appointment with him. I really, top of mind at that moment were the employees. They're not going to have jobs. Are they going to get severance? Can they file for unemployment? Like, how? Because some of these people had just been hired a couple of months earlier.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was really thinking about them, and I knew I would be fine. I would land on my feet. And I thought maybe even the company could continue. So there were lots of things going through my mind. I thought maybe I can bootstrap this thing. But actually, what happens when you take funding like that is your funder expects you to spend the money and scale quickly. So we had signed annual contracts for like a server hosting company. We had signed a lease. You commit to a lot of big expenses that then I had to unwind. And the easiest way to unwind it was to go out of business. Otherwise, I'd have to keep those commitments. So I did spend a few months unwinding the business, probably like 4 months. And that's when I was really angry and sad and um, frustrated that it just was not just what they did. It was they violated the contract, and they accused us of fraud, which was a complete lie. So I had a hard time with that. I was very frustrated that these bad people got away with what they did.
That has to leave a sour taste in your mouth, right? You've poured a lot of energy, love. You got your team, right? As well
Mhm.
as folks that are outside your team that are supporting you. You're unwinding the business. How do you move from that frustration and that anger where I'm sure you want to do something like, you motherfucker, blah, 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 what are you want to, pick up the phone and tell them, and
There
you know
must
it's
have been
not
some
going to
of
go
that.
anywhere, right? At this point, where's that point where you're like, all right, I'm moving on?
Well, it was easy because I was pregnant at the time, so I just had a
Mhm.
baby.
That
Uh,
would change things like that.
yeah, but I was very angry during that pregnancy, and I was worried it would affect the baby. I mean, there were
Mhm.
times when I would lie on my bed and just beat the mattress with my fists and scream like a toddler because I was so frustrated. Because I, as a person, am very committed to justice and fairness, and it just blows my mind when somebody does something that's so wrong and blatant, and there's nothing you can do about it. So I did have a lot of anger and frustration, but once you have a baby, you've got to tend to the baby. You don't even have time or energy to think about anything else. So I let it go, and honestly, I almost forgot about it.
Hmm.
When I've been on TikTok and when I'm on podcasts and things, a lot of times I don't even mention that I had another startup because I've forgotten. And to the point where people ask me, "Oh, have you ever raised venture capital?" And I say no, and I'm like, "Oh, yeah, I did back at like, it's a distant memory, but I've been talking about it a lot recently, and there is a chapter in my book about fidget."
Wow. Well, I know that startups don't always end the way you would like it to, and that didn't necessarily, obviously, didn't go the way you wanted, especially when you have people that are fraudsters in this case, withholding money or not paying, and the way they ended it, it certainly could have gone a lot better. And tell me about once you're able to move past that, you forgot it. Now you're on to your next thing where you're maybe I'm gonna do this differently. What was that mindset as you're past that? You have your baby. How do you move forward into the next gig?
So it's almost 10 years later. I mean, I did some other stuff in there in between, consulting and the worst job I've ever had, which is another story. And it's a new era, right? There are digital tools that make it easier to start a business. It still wasn't like it is now, it was still difficult. But I realized in retrospect that there was so much I could do bootstrapping from my home with very little money. There was LegalZoom, that was new, right? I could set
Mhm.
up all of my business documentation on LegalZoom. Um, I had more contacts, so there were a lot of things I could do to, get a logo together and a website together, very inexpensively because I had all these contacts who also, had been working in the business for about a decade. And so it was easier and you could do it more cost effectively. So the obstacles were lower. And so I was determined to not take any funding for as long as I could. And I was able to do that.
And so you started your next venture bootstrapping, right?
Yes.
And for those that have no idea, and maybe they're in their 20s or 30s, just explain what bootstrapping is so that people can have a juxtaposition on bootstrapping versus VC.
Yeah. Well, there are many aspects to bootstrapping. And the first is you do everything yourself as an entrepreneur in that initial stage of the business setup because you can. There are all these digital tools where you can do a lot of things to set up your business without having to hire experts or hire a vendor. And then once you get the business set up, bootstrappers use either their own personal resources or use hopefully the revenue coming in to fund their business. So you are on a slower growth trajectory because your investments in the business really is dependent on your own personal resources or the revenue that's coming into the business from your first few customers, right? And at some point, bootstrappers might take some friends and family money or angel money. So I did that. I took some angel money, but throughout the
And
entire
also, what's angel money? For those that are hearing this for the first time, they say, "Okay, gotcha, bootstrap check, angel money." That sounds like angel food. Is it something manna coming down from heaven, or what?
well, it can seem like that. It seemed like that to me. Angel money usually will come from someone you know, or someone 1 degree separated who hears about your business. Angels are rich people who enjoy taking risks on small companies, and they'll make a bet on your business by giving you, it could be anywhere from $5,000 to maybe 500,000, I would think is the range that most angel money is. In my case, I got a check for 125,000 in 2008, and this is from a personal friend who had just sold his first company and was suddenly very wealthy. And I was speaking to him one day, telling him what I was doing, and he really liked the idea for Boardroom Insiders. He liked the revenue model. And he said, "You should quit your consulting and do this full time." And I said, "Well, I don't have the money to build the proper database," because then you still did have to hire developers and, database build with a website on the front end of it. It was, $25,000 to $50,000 even back in 2008. So he said, "Well, I'll write you a check today." So he wrote me a check for 125,000. And the only thing he asked was that he be able to maintain 10% of the company. So he said, "Look, if you take more money later, I'll kick in some more because I want to stay at 10%." And so I took
How do
that
you feel,
money.
how do you feel at that time? So now you come, 2008, a couple years removed from being burned. This guy's only asking for 10%. Were you like, "Okay, I can do that," or were you like, "What's behind? He's only wanting 10%."
No, I mean, I thought it was a great valuation for something that really wasn't, operating yet with customers. So I took it, and I thought I didn't really understand why he wanted to maintain that 10%. And in fact, later he forgot, because it was 14 years that he was waiting for his return on an investment, and he went off and sold other companies, and now he's the CEO of a publicly held company. So a lot happened in his life that he wasn't worried about my little company over on the side, which is exactly what you want from your angel. You don't want
Yeah.
someone who's calling you every week going like, "What's going on? When are you going to sell?" And you also want someone who's a seasoned entrepreneur who knows exactly what you're going through, and they'll take your call and offer advice when you ask for it, but otherwise they just leave you alone. And so that's what he did.
Nice, nice.
Yeah.
Well, that's great that angel investor came along, essentially gave you the what you needed to get off the ground, your website, your database, and as you're getting through you built this new venture, you're getting it off the ground. At what point were you starting to realize there may be an exit here? You talked about $48 million, but were there signs and signals that let you know you were on the right track, or were you like, "Boy, I hope this doesn't go like down like the last time"?
Well, from the very beginning, I knew I had something valuable because I was working with Cisco systems, Sun Microsystems, Google, eventually Oracle, like all the biggest tech companies. I was getting my information in front of them. We were basically a content company and SaaS company, and they loved it. And they told me to keep going. And those organizations move very slowly. And especially, I had 1 foot in my company and 1 foot as a consultant to those companies. And the only thing I was really struggling with in the beginning was when you're a good consultant, though, they want to hold on to you and they want you to keep doing what you're doing for them.
Mhm.
In tech marketing, no one does their own decks. People like me do them. So every piece of content you see is being done by a consultant. So they really rely heavily on the consultants. And so while they loved what I was doing and wanted more of it, they didn't want me to go away as a consultant and become this SaaS business owner, right? They wanted me to keep doing their decks. And so I
Was there a moment?
knew.
Was there a moment, by the way? Did you have a moment, or was there a moment you're like, "Pah, enough of the consultancy. I'm going on my own."
Oh yeah, it was a little seemingly inconsequential request, and I just was like, I'm not doing this. I'm done, because the consulting was incredibly lucrative, and this is one way I was able to survive. I live in San Francisco. I had two little kids. My husband was taking care of the kids, so we didn't have any other income. So I had to keep doing it, and it was a huge amount of time. I worked every night and weekend because I was doing two different things here. But I knew that at some point I would have to stop. And what happened was I was working for one of these big tech companies, and I had my main point of contact was just really disorganized, very hard to work with. And I did everything for her. And the last straw was when she came to me and she said, I just can't manage all the scheduling associated with all these projects. So I'd like you to take over the calendaring for everything. And there is nothing I dislike more than calendar invites. And I screw it up every time. I don't know how I do it. But for me, it's like the little things that other people find easy that I just can't do. And I hate doing it. And I once accidentally invited every employee of my company to my Zumba class that I was teaching by accident.
Oh my. Oh. You know what? I screwed up royally with invites. I put on the wrong dates. Even
Yeah,
today.
or if you're traveling, you have the wrong time zone, you think you're correcting for it and you forget the calendar. So plus I didn't have access to these people's calendars because it was, a big giant company and I'm a contractor. So I was in Tahoe with my family on vacation and I just came unglued at this little tiny request. And I was like, I'm quitting. And they said, perfect, quit. And I'm like, I don't know how we're going to manage financially. And my husband's like, it'll be fine. And so I literally quit a, $300,000 a year gig because somebody asked me to start sending calendar invites.
Would you say that was a wise move at the time, or were you like, I don't care, I don't give a flying bleep, I don't give a flying
I did not care. And this person was also, I learned a ton in terms of how you treat people, and you never know if some little thing is just such a pet peeve for that person that they're just going to leave. So I try to make work easy for people. Another thing she did is she used to forward me every single email that came through about a project without reading it. And so you read one email and it says one thing, and then you read another email and it contradicts that. So you have to kind of look at the dates and times and say, okay, which one is the most current? So combing through that all the time. So it was like, it became an administrative nightmare. So I don't care, if someone is your vendor, don't do that to them. Like, net it out for them, organize your stuff before you send, because you're not paying them to be your administrative assistant. You're paying them to do what they're good at. And you don't want to sow seeds of discontent with someone who really does great work for you. So I always take lessons away from everything that happens and try to apply those moving forward. That's worked really well for me.
Wow. Well, those are great words of wisdom. And I'm sure anybody that's hearing this could take that to the bank, because we all in this environment today, we work with vendors that are not part, and contractors that are not part of the organization, but they provide critical services. And finding somebody good is hard. It is really hard. You're going to find a lot of people. You can put a job posting in tomorrow and boom, you hire somebody. But finding somebody like what you're saying, you're adding value and you're critical and you're just not a cog in the wheel. And I can't believe they just simply let you go like that. Like, but like, come on, Sharon, no, think about it. Give it the weekend. And come back and think on it. But you're like, F you, I'm getting out of here. No more.
Well,
Quitting during a vacation, that must feel freeing as can be. Most people that go away on vacation and they're trying to get their head away from their job for the first 6 days of the vacation. And then finally, when you're relaxed, it's already time to go home. Was this at the beginning, middle, or end of your trip? And was it a liberating experience once you had that baggage kind of off your shoulders?
well, that all sounds great, but no, because the financial implications of quitting were huge. And I knew that I would be in for a fight because they wouldn't want to let me go, which was true. I mean, even after I quit, this company came back and was a database customer. So they became a customer of Boardroom Insiders. And they tried to pull me back into consulting projects that way. Like, oh, we have this custom project. And so I had to kind of draw a line in the sand for everybody and say, I'll do custom work, but if it has nothing to do with the value proposition of Boardroom Insiders, I'm not doing it. So I'll do Boardroom Insiders was a platform to enable and support C-suite selling and executive engagement. So if it had anything to do with that, like if they would say, well, we have these 50 people we're trying to attract to an event, could you make recommendations of what the event should look like to attract these specific people? I would do that. And that was a custom project. But if they would come back and say, well, our consumer division wants a strategy of which trade shows they should go to next year, I wouldn't do that because it had nothing to do with advancing the business of Boardroom Insiders.
Sure. So you had to draw a line.
And I had to, and it was difficult, but it was necessary because I only had so much time and I wanted everything I did to focus on the business.
And as the business started growing, this is the part where we started. The business starts growing. You start getting offers and you're saying others are dangling 40, $50 million. Eventually you realize that that's not what they're going to give you. But what happens the moment you said, okay, well, we'll make an exit strategy here. How's that play out as you start through the process and then you eventually you talk about, you told me how it all went down on the plane, but just tell us a little bit about that. How you now, okay, you decide, okay, time for an exit. Let's go forward. Or what motivated you, really more important, what motivated you to say, okay, yeah, maybe it's time for something else?
It was the timing. We were very concerned about a crash, either a market crash or a tech crash. And both of those things ended up happening shortly after we sold. We were worried. We had a team in Russia. Our tech vendor was based in Charlotte, but our team was like 3 people in Russia, and they were fantastic. And we were having conversations months before the war broke out in Ukraine about how problematic that could potentially be. Because I don't know if you remember, but all through like 2021, there were rumblings about Russia. And I remember sitting with our vendor at dinner in Charlotte, and they were saying, it's not going to be a problem unless they disable this SWIFT system, which is how payments are sent to Russia. And they said, if that goes, then we might be in trouble. And so, even into early 2021, I was worried about having this team in Russia that we worked with constantly. And as it turned out, after we sold, shortly thereafter, a month later, the war broke out, and that team, some of them fled to Istanbul, and it was completely disrupted. So we were thinking about all of those things because we were managing the business well. Everything was going great, but we had more people working for us than we had ever had before. And we were kind of exhausted. And so if we're exhausted managing the company through good times, we couldn't imagine what that would be like managing the company through bad times. And our age was a factor. I'm going to be 60 next year. At the time, I was 56, 57. And my partner was like 9 years younger than me. And I didn't want to spend my late 50s and early 60s managing a company through tough times. So there were all those things that we were thinking about, and timing. It all falls under the category of timing. Also, at that time, multiples for SaaS company sales were at an all-time high. So it was a very frothy market, and we didn't want to miss out on that either.
Money,
Um,
cheap money
yeah.
still. There was quantitative easing. I know we play a lot in the Amazon space, and
Mhm.
Amazon aggregators became a new thing around 2021. Cheap money flowing into these big funds that were buying Amazon companies or Amazon-based companies. And when cheap money is flowing, you've been around since you know the tech game. 2000 things imploded. 2008 also financial crisis. It's like you said, it's a time. There's a circle here. Things are really good, and you pulled the trigger on it, right? And so 2021, 2022 comes around. You're like, maybe the party will end with this.
Yeah, we were really nervous about that. And so the call from the PE firm came in April of 21. I launched a search for a banker pretty much right after that. It took me several months to interview different bankers, talk to their references. I talked to 12 different entrepreneurs who had sold their companies and learned so much from them, and chose our banker, hired them Labor Day weekend, so September of 21, and the sale was wrapped up by the end of January 22. And that was an intense process. There are many different aspects to that. I led the process. So I learned a lot. And that really is what launched me into what I'm doing now. Because, I mean, I live in San Francisco. You could probably count 10 or 12 people on my block who have done this and done it on a bigger scale. But once I started talking to people afterwards, I realized how rare this is, especially being a woman founder. And people begged me to tell their story, to tell my story, and to share information. And so now I have a whole new chapter doing that.
And I really love how you shared so much on TikTok about your journey and that experience being in that bubble. You said to me, it's like being in a bubble. And when you're in that bubble, sometimes you don't know you're in the bubble, but you speaking out on it was something unheard of. Being a woman in tech, you speak a lot about transparency in pay, from a payday perspective. I know on your video, you had talked on one of your TikToks, you had talked about wrapping up the deal, closing the deal, because the deal's not closed until literally the money is in the bank. Tell
Yeah.
me about that. You're on the plane. What happens next?
Well, I was on a plane because I had been in South Carolina where my partner and our team was for 2 weeks, waiting for the deal to wrap. And it was supposed to close 3 times and it didn't each time. There was a delay for various reasons. And so I was really homesick and I needed to go home because, how long do you stay there? So they had told me that the deal was going to close that morning before my flight left. And I thought, well, I'll believe it when I see it. And I kept waiting for the text to jump on a Zoom and close it. I was in the American Airlines Club waiting. I was
At
in the
the
middle
airport.
of at the airport. There was a crowd of like guys in their 30s on their way to a ski trip doing shots behind me at 8 o'clock in the morning. And I had to get on the phone with the CEO of the buyer because I had made a comment the day before that upset people. So they said, well, we have to make sure we're still aligned. And
Mhm.
it was kind of ridiculous, but I had to do that with all these guys doing shots behind me. And then nothing happened. And so I got on the plane and was still waiting as we were just sitting on the plane. And I had been upgraded to first class because I fly so much. And so that was nice. But then nothing happened before takeoff. And so, the plane takes off and you have to have your devices off. And as soon as they
Mhm.
said I could turn it back on, I turned it back on, still nothing. And I think it was a couple hours into the flight where I got the thumbs up that everything had closed. And then I texted my husband, and the money hit our account immediately. So while I
Mhm.
was in the air, I sold my company for 25 million, and $10 million hit my bank account. And it was wild because I couldn't, what was I going to do? I couldn't jump up and down in the plane
You
or
wanted to go,
Well, you
celebrate.
could. You're in first class. You're allowed to do that in first class, I believe.
or invite a bunch of those other fellas that were doing shots. Come back up here to first class. Let's do a round of shots.
Well, I was drinking champagne, like 10:30, 11 o'clock in the morning, in the plane. And then I got home, and yeah, it was wild. And I made another video where I talked about how much debt I had, because bootstrapping can decimate your finances. Usually that's not a big deal if you're in your 20s or 30s, but when you're in your 50s, it's a big deal when you don't save for retirement for a decade and you rack up a bunch of debt just living your life because you underpay yourself for so long. So that was wonderful to have all of that wiped out, because my husband and I, we agreed, like, let's pay this off like the moment the money comes in. So we had credit card debt. We owed about $100,000 to family. We had a line of credit we had to pay off, and so there was a lot of money going out the door right away. But this is one of the reasons I did it. This is what I envisioned could happen someday, and I didn't think it would take so long or be so difficult. But we had a lot of fun along the way too, and I'm really proud of what we built.
And if you're, let's say, in the Matrix, just like in that scene where Neo is confronted with the red and the blue pill, one path leads you down the VC path to do what you just did, with the other path strictly bootstrapping. Which of those two paths would you take? Now,
Always bootstrapping, always.
always bootstrap.
Because I think I would have felt that way anyway, but here's what I learned after putting out that video that I had no idea, that just blew my mind. That video went hugely viral, where I talk about, I sold my company for 25 million. Here's how much I walked away with. And I went through all the deal fees, my taxes, everything. And it's pinned to the top of my TikTok if anyone wants to go watch that. It got shared a lot by venture capitalists and other VC backed entrepreneurs. And I could not understand that, because I thought, why are the people who would never give me the time of day and didn't think I was a bona fide entrepreneur because I was not VC backed, why would they think this is so great? And they were very complimentary about it. And I later found out, a woman venture capitalist actually explained it to me. She said, what you don't understand, and what a lot of people don't talk about, is that you could raise 50 million as a founder for your company and sell it for 200. So many
200 million.
multiples, yeah, many multiples beyond what I did, and walk away with less than you did, Sharon. And I'm like, what? Really? And she said, yes. She said, founder equity typically goes down to single digits. And she said, and that's for the entire founding team. So I was amazed by
Serious
that.
delusion. Very diluted.
Serious delusion. And not only that, but, and I don't really understand all the different deal terms that VCs put in place, but you can think you gave up X percentage of equity for your funding, right? So you say, okay, I have X percent, the VCs have Y percent. But there are deal terms that will allow them to get even more than that percentage. And so you end up with less than you thought. And you might be fully aware of that going in, but you might not.
How do you exactly? So if you're in your 20s, 30s, maybe early 40s, and you're entering into this agreement, how do you make sure that doesn't happen? Like a VC they start off with 51, and then when you close, you realize, oh, they took 80.
Right. You know what? I don't know. I get a great lawyer. And here's the thing that I think I've been able to tap into. People are afraid to ask questions. They're intimidated. And there's a lot of gatekeeping using jargon. And what I mean by gatekeeping is withholding the true information that you need to know, right? Because people use all kinds of jargon and no one wants to say, well, I don't understand what that means. Could you explain this to me? And I think if you're an entrepreneur and you're having those conversations with the VC, I think there's a fear that if you ask too many kind of easy questions, they're going to renege because they're going to think, oh, this person doesn't know what they're doing. People are afraid of looking stupid.
Mhm.
And you've just got to push through and make sure you understand every single detail in plain English. What does this mean? What does preferred stock mean? So what does that mean when we sell? And I didn't do that the first time. When I raised VC funding, that's not why we lost out. It was a different reason. But that's really important. And I almost think like if you can bootstrap, do it. Just stay away from that for as long as you can. There may come a time in your business where you do need to raise capital, but if you have a viable, profitable business at that point, then you have leverage, right? In the beginning, you don't have any leverage. And I just think you're not, you don't know what you don't know. I know now because I've been through it, but you're not going to outsmart the VCs when it comes to financing your company. You're just not. They're in it to make money. They don't care about your business. They really don't. They don't care about your customers or how happy they are. They care about the money.
That's
And
it.
that's not a derogatory thing. That's the business they're in.
Yeah.
And you have to know that going in. And yeah, they might say complimentary things about your business, but they don't care. And it's almost the same thing with when you're acquired. It's all about the numbers. And as long as you know that going in, you can manage, hopefully you'll ask a lot of questions and understand what all of the financial implications are for you as a founder that hopes to exit someday. And, I'm just getting more and more information that shocks me. I talked to somebody the other day regarding an acquisition that happened years ago that I was very interested in because it was kind of in our space. It was an $175 million acquisition.
Mhm.
And there were a few founders. And I just found out that one of the founders walked away with 2.5 million from that exit, 175 million. I walked
170
away.
million, so 2%.
Yeah.
So ended up at almost 2% of the deal.
Yeah. And, I think that was before tax. Like I walked away with 9 million after tax. So on a $25 million deal. So that's why my video went so viral. But at the time I didn't understand. And it's only now that I'm learning what the financial aspects of these deals often looks like for founders. And it's not good.
It's not pretty.
And it's
Definitely.
not pretty. And, there are trade-offs, right? Some kinds of businesses, you can't do it without venture capital because they're very capital intensive. If it's like some kind of manufacturing or, you need a ton of computing support, in the AI business, for example. But there's this myth that you have to raise venture capital if you're building any kind of company has anything to do with tech. And it's because of what we hear, the stories we hear in the media. And that's just not the case. There are lots of SaaS entrepreneurs out there who are bootstrapping and they're running it with a virtual team of contractors from their home, and they're doing really well with it. And the other thing is if you want to build something and sell it, you don't have to sell it for 100 million or even 25 million. You could spend 3 years building something and sell it for 600K or 2 million or 1 million. I've since met entrepreneurs, particularly women entrepreneurs, who do this over and over again. They build these little businesses, get them to profitability, and then flip them. And then they do it again, and then they flip them again. And they're really smart about the way they do it. And you don't have to be a Zuckerberg. You don't have to be, a Sarah Blakely, the Spanx lady, right? There's such a range of entrepreneurial success. And if you think you have to get to like a Zuckerberg level to be a success, you're going to quit before you even start. And so this is the type of thing I like to talk to people about.
So in speaking with you, Sharon, I appreciate what you're saying about some of your employees from Boardroom Advisors and the previous company. When you decided to work through with your exit strategy, what did you implement to also reward your loyal employees that helped to get you to where you were able to exit?
Yeah, so we put in place what in the industry is called a phantom equity plan. We didn't want to do a stock option plan. It's complicated. We had a lot of very young employees. We knew they wouldn't understand it. It would be expensive to administer and put together. And you do all that and you don't even know if you're going to exit, if it's going to be relevant, right? Nobody ever asked for equity. Unlike here in the Bay Area, you hire people in the Charlotte area and the South Carolina suburbs of Charlotte, and nobody asked for equity. But in 2020, when we doubled in size because we were, one of those digital tools that everyone wanted to have during the pandemic, and we started getting all this outreach, and we thought, you know what, we want our employees to share in the exit if we have one. That was, the do-gooder kind of angle, but more strategic angle was we want to be out in the open with what we're doing in case anybody finds out, because a lack of information causes people to get distracted and gossip and create their own narrative around what you're doing, and I don't like that. So we just decided to tell them. So at the end of 2020, we had this habit or tradition of having our final meeting of the year, and we would talk about our goals for the following year and give a presentation. And then we would also roll out one new benefit every December. We did that like 4 years in a row. And so in December of 2020, we announced that we said, look, someday we do want to sell the company. We don't know if it's going to be a year from now or 5 years from now. But when that happens, we would like everyone to get a nice bonus. And so we're putting in place a phantom equity plan. And what that means is in the event of an exit, of a sale, 3.5% of the net proceeds gets put in a pool and divided among the employees. Not equally divided. We assigned chunks based on seniority and contribution to the business. And then there was a 2-year vesting schedule. And at the time that we granted the phantom equity, we had employees who were instantly vested because they had been there 2 years or more. And then we had a bunch of people we had just hired in 2020 who were just at the beginning of that vesting process. So we rolled it out at that last meeting of the year, and a lot of people still didn't really understand what that meant. Like I said, a lot of people right out of college or very early on in their career. And I know from experience, you're not thinking about your retirement or your financial security really at that point. You just need to have a job to pay your rent. You're not thinking that far ahead. And you also assume that nothing's going to really occur. But when we sold the company, we had 14 vested employees who split almost $800,000.
That's a nice chunk of cash.
I like it.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's awesome because that doesn't happen in every company. And in your case, it had a very nice, happy ending. And, you mentioned something to me the other day when we had a chance to talk that you haven't splurged as much as you thought with the windfall that you had after you paid. You still had a nice little chunk of change. And there's a resort in Montana. I don't know did they ever reach out to you? Pause Up in Montana. Did they get in touch, or did you make the trip over there?
No, they didn't get in touch. I haven't made the trip. I've had a lot of life changes happen since this. Like my 85-year-old mother has moved in with us, and we did put an apartment in the house. My younger son has come home from college, so we have a multi-generational household going on here now, and we're kind of making sure that if we do travel, like who's in charge of what, and who needs help, and all of that. We put a ton of money into our home. I paid off our mortgage. All kinds of money has gone, and so while I could definitely afford to go, I can't pull the trigger. And I think I made a video about it, an extended video, because people had so many questions about that. And I said, look, I know what would happen if I went there. I would have like 10 drinks a day and overeat because everything's included. I'm never going to change from that person. I'm always going to be that person because I grew up with a scarcity mindset. And I would be bugging every family member, like, did you do the skeet shooting? Did you do the spa? Did you do, nobody would be able to be relaxing because I would be forcing them to constantly be eating, drinking, or doing activities. So I don't know if I'm a pause up kind of gal. Uh, if I can handle, all the all inclusive type of situation.
Oh, okay.
But it really is expensive. And I made another video called Undercover Rich People, because after I sold the company, I realized, people feel comfortable telling you, people who you thought were just the same as you, like middle class, like, oh yeah, we went on this great trip. And then you look it up and it's like 15 grand a week per person or something. I'm like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, that's not a programmer's salary.
Yeah, well, I don't know. That's just, I would have to have a lot more money to feel comfortable like taking those types of trips routinely, because I have to assume that I'm never going to make another dollar. I hope that's not the case, but I have to assume that. And I have to assume, maybe I'll be fortunate enough to live into my 90s. So this money I don't want to get to be like 75 or 80 and I've spent all the money, or I can't absorb the market ups and downs that come with, being invested. So I'm still pretty cautious. But I'm definitely enjoying life. I'm going next week to New York for New York Tech Week, and I'm taking my older son, and he's a hardcore vegan. So we're going to 11 Madison Park. I don't know if you've heard about it, but look it up. It's like a Michelin star restaurant that went all vegan during the pandemic, and it's ridiculously expensive. But we were. Yeah, it's an experience, and we heard about it, and I turned to him. I said, "We should go. We should go there just once." And so we're going to go. It's like $1,600 for 3 people.
Promise me you go. You TikTok the hell out of it.
Oh, I'm going to. I am going to. Yeah.
I'm looking forward. I can't wait to see the TikToks. I'm a fan. I follow you on TikTok, so I can't wait for other folks to follow you as well. So if folks want to follow you, Sharon, where should they go? Where do you put a lot of your information? People want to get in touch with you. Where should people go?
Well, my main platforms are TikTok and LinkedIn, but I put a lot more personal stuff on TikTok because I don't think LinkedIn is the place for that. So, if I want to rant about something annoying or share some personal information, I'll put it on TikTok. So that's probably the best place to follow me. And it's Sharon K. Gillenwater.
And there's another Sharon Gillenwater, as we found out. That's an author. That's why we stress the K, because I don't think you write fiction love stories and such as she does.
So, yes, that is hilarious. So Sharon Gillenwater is a very well-known South Texas Christian romance novelist, very specific.
Right.
And I've had people look at my luggage tag in the airport and say, "Oh, are you the romance novelist?" It's like, no. And I think now on Google, it has my picture and her books. So
yes. Confuse the heck out of us.
That's what I found today.
We're trying to get that fixed on Google, but it's been a few months. I don't know if they're going to fix it. And my husband did buy me one of her books a couple years ago for Christmas. That was fun.
Guy with a cowboy hat, rough shave.
Yeah, I think we could not be more different, the two of us. And I've never spoken with her, but yeah, she has a huge following, so it can be confusing, especially now that I'm an author too.
I know it confused us for a hot minute as we were like, wait a minute, I didn't know she wrote. Oh, that's not her. She didn't write all those romance books. So, and now you tell me Texas and San Francisco, two very different places. So.
Yeah.
But Sharon, I want to thank you for joining us today, leaving us with a ton of knowledge. And I'm hoping that folks that listen to this can take some takeaways, but can actually put some of that into action if they're going into a new venture. I know I learned a lot with VC. We ourselves, I have been through some of the challenges that you're talking about. I haven't really put an episode together to talk about it. Maybe someday we'll do that. You're giving me the courage to maybe build up and talk about that, because I haven't made a TikTok on that either. So I may talk on that subject a little bit more. but I really appreciate you kind of peeling back the curtain and letting us look inside that world, because it's all unicorns, rainbows, Zuckerbergs, AI, open AI, and Anthropic, and all that money swashing around Silicon Valley and Nvidia and all that. But there's a lot more going on below the surface that people don't know about, and I'm glad that you share that today with us.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me.
Oh, of course. Listen, anytime you want to come back, drop some knowledge, just ring me up. Hey, I want to come back. You got an open invite to do that.
Thank you.
So we've been talking with Sharon K. Gillenwater, author. Plug in your book again, Sharon. What's the name of that book again?
The book is called Scaling with Soul: How I Built and Sold a $25 million Tech Company Without Being an Asshole.
Love it. I love that title. It cracks me up. And so if you want to support this channel, I invite you to hit that subscribe button if you've gotten value out of what we've talked about with Sharon. And if you want us to bring more wonderful guests like that, I invite you to go ahead and check out the links in the description below, especially if you're a business and you're dealing with complex IT issues. That's what we specialize in. Go ahead and contact us. We'll get in touch with you and we can figure out a plan that's right for you. So I want to thank my guest today, Sharon. I want to thank Dave for joining me, and we will see you next time. Thank you.